The Metropolitan Grand Ballrooms sparkled with the kind of sophisticated elegance that only unlimited budgets and impeccable taste could achieve. 30-foot ceilings soared above marble floors inlaid with gold accents, while crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables dressed in silk linens and adorned with orchid centerpieces that cost more than most people's rent. Mom's 25th wedding anniversary gala had transformed the city's most exclusive venue into a palace fit for royalty, with over 300 guests celebrating a quarter-century of marriage in absolute luxury. I stood near the dessert station in my simple navy dress from Target, watching the carefully choreographed dance of wealth and social positioning unfold around me. The guest list read like a directory of the city's power brokers, business titans, political figures, entertainment celebrities, and old money families who treated networking like an art form. Mom held court in her custom Valentino gown worth more than most people's cars, while Dad commanded attention in his bespoke Italian tuxedo, both of them glowing with the satisfaction of hosting the social event of the season. My brother Jonathan moved through the crowd like a shark sensing opportunity, his wife Miranda sparkling beside him in jewelry that required its own security detail. They'd just returned from acquiring their 4th vacation property, something in Monaco if I'd heard correctly, and were regaling anyone who'd listen with stories about European real estate markets and private jet logistics. My sister Vanessa held court near the champagne fountain with her hedge fund manager husband, both of them radiating the confidence that came from never having questioned their place in rooms like this. The conversation flowed effortlessly between stock market predictions, art auction results, and charitable board appointments, the standard currency of people who'd never worried about money. Amanda. Jonathan's voice carried across the ballroom as he spotted me by the dessert display. There you are. I was just telling the Hendersons about our family. He approached with his usual mixture of brotherly affection and barely concealed condescension, Miranda gliding beside him with the practiced smile of someone accustomed to being the most elegantly dressed woman in any room. Amanda works in... What was it again? He asked, though we'd had this conversation at every family gathering for the past 5 years. Administrative consulting, I said quietly, knowing exactly where this was headed. Right, administrative consulting, he repeated for the benefit of the growing circle of elegantly dressed guests who'd gravitated toward our conversation. She means she does temp work. Office filing, data entry, that sort of thing. The group made polite sounds of understanding mixed with barely concealed pity. Everyone knew that successful families occasionally produced members who just couldn't seem to achieve the same level of success as their siblings. It's actually project-based business consulting, I corrected gently, though I knew it wouldn't matter. Same difference, Miranda said with her practiced socialite laugh. The important thing is that Amanda's happy with her lifestyle choices. Mrs. Henderson, wife of the city's most prominent real estate developer, tried to offer diplomatic support. Administrative work is very important. Organizations couldn't function without good support staff. Oh, absolutely, Jonathan agreed with theatrical enthusiasm. Someone has to handle the small details while people like us focus on the big picture. Amanda's found her level, and there's nothing wrong with that. The conversation swirled around me as they discussed various business ventures and investment opportunities, occasionally including me with questions clearly designed to highlight how little I understood about their world of high finance and corporate strategy. The thing is, Jonathan said, his voice carrying to nearby tables, events like tonight really put things in perspective. Look around at this venue, these people, this level of sophistication. This is what success creates. The ability to host gatherings that bring together the city's most influential figures. He gestured expansively at the magnificent ballrooms surrounding us. The Metropolitan Grand probably costs $50,000 just for the space rental, he continued, clearly enjoying his audience's impressed reactions. Add the catering, the entertainment, the floral arrangements, the security. Mom and Dad are probably spending close to $200,000 on tonight's celebration. $200,000? Someone whispered with appropriate awe. At least, Miranda confirmed. The champagne selection alone probably costs more than most people make in a year. This is what generational wealth looks like. The ability to celebrate life's milestones without worrying about budget constraints. I sipped my sparkling water and listened to them analyze the evening's expenses with the expertise of people who'd attended countless similar events. The orchestra probably cost $15,000 for the evening. The floral arrangements were easily $20,000. The custom menu from the city's most exclusive catering company added another 30,000. Amanda could never afford anything remotely like this, Jonathan said, his voice taking on a tone of gentle condescension. Her temp work probably brings in what, 30,000 a year? Maybe 40 if she's lucky? It's really quite sweet that Mom and Dad include her in events like this, Vanessa added, joining our conversation circle with her husband in tow. It gives her a chance to experience luxury, even if it's just for one evening. The group nodded with benevolent understanding, pleased to be associated with such charitable inclusion of less fortunate family members. The sad truth, Jonathan continued, clearly warming to his favorite theme, is that Amanda will never belong in rooms like this. She can attend as family obviously, but she'll always be the one who doesn't quite fit in. His voice dropped to what he probably thought was a confidential whisper, though it carried clearly to the surrounding tables. Look at her clothes, her jewelry, her general presentation. She's trying, bless her heart, but you can tell she's not comfortable with this level of sophistication. This is for successful people, people who understand what real wealth looks like. It must be difficult, Mrs. Henderson said sympathetically, attending events where everyone else operates at such a different economic level. I'm sure it is, Miranda agreed. But Amanda seems to handle it well. She knows her place. The conversation continued along these lines as the evening's entertainment began. A string quartet that had performed at Carnegie Hall, followed by a jazz ensemble that typically played at presidential inaugurations. Standard entertainment for people who considered excellence a basic requirement rather than a luxury. I excused myself quietly from the conversation and walked toward the terrace doors, needing some fresh air after listening to my family analyze my supposed financial limitations with such clinical precision. The night air was cool against my skin as I stepped onto the marble terrace overlooking the city lights. My phone buzzed with a text from my head of security. Everything proceeding smoothly. Should we implement the family protocol as discussed? I typed back, not yet. Let me know if Jonathan becomes more problematic. Amanda? A familiar voice called from behind me. I turned to see Marcus Chin, the Metropolitan Grand's general manager, approaching with his usual professional smile. I'd worked with Marcus for 3 years on various events and property improvements, and he'd become one of my most trusted venue managers. Ms. Williams, he corrected himself, using the more formal address we'd agreed upon for public events. I wanted to confirm that everything is meeting your expectations tonight. It's perfect, Marcus. Your team has outdone themselves. Thank you. The Henderson party asked about booking the ballroom for their daughter's wedding next spring. Should I have them contact your office directly? That would be fine. Sarah can handle the scheduling details. Marcus nodded and returned inside, leaving me alone with the city lights and the sounds of celebration drifting from the ballroom. I stayed on the terrace for perhaps 10 minutes, enjoying the peaceful contrast to the intense social performance happening inside. When I returned to the ballroom, I noticed Jonathan holding court near the bar with an even larger audience, his voice carrying more loudly than before. The thing people don't understand about wealth, he was saying with the authority of someone who'd inherited rather than earned his position, is that it's not just about money. It's about understanding how to move in sophisticated circles, how to appreciate quality, how to contribute meaningfully to important conversations. He gestured around the ballroom with obvious satisfaction. My sister Amanda, for example, is a sweet person, but she just doesn't have the background to truly appreciate an event like this. She can attend, obviously, but she doesn't belong here in any real sense. The crowd murmured agreement, pleased to be included in such insider analysis of family dynamics and social hierarchies. This venue, these people, this entire level of society, it's simply beyond her experience. She'll go back to her little apartment and her temp jobs tomorrow, and this will just be a brief glimpse into a world she'll never truly understand. I walked past their conversation toward the reception desk, where Marcus was coordinating with the catering staff. Marcus, I said quietly, could you have security speak with my brother? He seems to be getting a bit too comfortable with the bar service. Of course, Ms. Williams. Should they be discreet about it? Whatever approach seems most appropriate for the situation. Marcus nodded and spoke briefly into his headset. Within moments, 2 uniformed security officers approached Jonathan's animated conversation circle. Excuse me, sir, the lead security officer said politely, The boss would like a word with you. Jonathan laughed, clearly enjoying the attention his stories had been receiving. The boss? Do you mean the venue manager? I'm family Jonathan Williams. This is my mother's anniversary party. Yes, sir, we're aware of the family connection. Ms. Williams specifically requested that we speak with you. Ms. Williams? Jonathan's expression shifted from amusement to confusion. You mean my sister Amanda? What could she possibly want with security? The second security officer stepped forward with professional courtesy. Sir, Ms. Williams owns this venue. She's requested that you moderate your behavior or we'll need to ask you to leave. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the jazz ensemble's piano solo from across the ballroom. She owns what? Jonathan's voice came out as barely more than a whisper. The Metropolitan Grand Hotel and Conference Center, the security officer explained patiently. Ms. Amanda Williams is the owner. She's requested that we address your disruptive behavior. The circle of elegant guests who'd been enjoying Jonathan's commentary about my lack of sophistication now stared at him with growing fascination, clearly sensing that the evening's drama had taken an unexpected turn. That's impossible, Miranda said, her voice rising slightly. Amanda does temp work. She can't possibly own a venue like this. Ma'am, the security officer replied with professional neutrality, I assure you that Ms. Williams is the owner. This conversation was specifically at her request. Jonathan looked around the circle of faces, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. There must be some mistake. Amanda doesn't have money for. This is a multi-million-dollar property. $47 million actually, I said, approaching the group with Marcus beside me. Though that was the purchase price 3 years ago. Current valuation is probably closer to $60 million. The silence stretched uncomfortably long as Jonathan processed this information. Amanda, he said slowly, what are you talking about? Williams Hospitality Group, I explained calmly. We own 17 properties across 6 cities. The Metropolitan Grand was one of our earlier acquisitions. Mrs. Henderson leaned forward with obvious fascination. Amanda, Williams Hospitality Group, that's your company? You handle the luxury event spaces throughout the region. Among other things, we focus on high-end venues that cater to corporate events and private celebrations. But the temp work, Vanessa said weakly, having appeared at the edge of our conversation. You said you do administrative consulting. I do consulting work for venue operations and event management. It's how I identify acquisition opportunities and operational improvements for existing properties. Marcus stepped forward with obvious pride. Ms. Williams has transformed our event services over the past 3 years. The Metropolitan Grand has become the most sought-after venue in the city under her leadership. Jonathan was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Amanda, how is this possible? Where did you get $47 million? The hospitality business is more profitable than most people realize, I said simply. Especially when you understand operations from the ground up. Ground up? Miranda asked faintly. I started with a small event space downtown 5 years ago. Learned catering, venue management, guest services, everything from actual hands-on experience. When larger properties came on the market, I had the expertise to recognize their potential. The security officer cleared his throat diplomatically. Ms. Williams, should we continue with the removal request, or has the situation been resolved? I think we're fine now, I said. Though perhaps you could make sure the bar service is appropriately monitored for the rest of the evening. Of course, ma'am. As the security officers returned to their posts, the circle of guests continued staring at me with various expressions of shock, confusion, and dawning understanding. Williams Hospitality Group, Dad said, appearing beside our conversation with Mom in tow, both of them clearly having overheard enough to be thoroughly confused. Amanda, what is Williams Hospitality Group? My company, Dad. I started it to acquire and operate luxury event venues. Your company? Mom repeated weakly. Amanda, you own this entire hotel? The hotel, the conference center, the adjacent restaurant, and the parking structure. It's all one integrated property. Dad sat down heavily in the nearest chair. This venue, tonight's celebration. You're paying for your mother's anniversary party? Well, it's complimentary, obviously. Owner's privilege. Complimentary. Mom's voice was barely audible. Amanda, What would tonight's event normally cost? About $250,000 all-inclusive. Jonathan's estimate was close, though he missed a few details. The number seemed to echo in the sudden silence surrounding our family group. $250,000, Vanessa whispered. As a gift. It's Mom's 25th anniversary. That seems worth celebrating properly. Jonathan found his voice, though it came out shaky. Amanda, I don't understand. If you own venues like this, if you have this kind of money, why do you live so simply? Why do you dress like? Why don't you show it? Show what? That I have money? That I can afford expensive clothes and jewelry? I gestured around the ballroom. I'd rather spend money on creating beautiful experiences for other families than on impressing people at parties. But the things we said tonight, Miranda protested. About you not belonging here, not understanding wealth, were said while standing in a venue I own at a party I'm hosting surrounded by staff I employ, I finished. The irony wasn't lost on me. Marcus approached again, this time with a folder in his hands. Ms. Williams, the Henderson wedding contract is ready for your review, and the Morrison corporate event wants to discuss expanding their annual conference to include our sister property in Denver. Denver? Dad asked weakly. Williams Hospitality operates venues in 6 cities, I explained. We're expanding into Texas and Florida next year. 6 cities, Mom repeated mechanically. Amanda, what is Williams Hospitality Group worth? Current portfolio valuation is approximately $340 million. Annual revenue is around $180 million across all properties. The numbers settled over our family group like fog rolling in from the ocean. $340 million, Jonathan said, his voice filled with something that sounded like nausea. Give or take. Property valuations fluctuate with the market. Vanessa put her head in her hands. I said you didn't belong here. I said you didn't understand what real wealth looked like. While celebrating at an event that I own and am hosting for free, I pointed out. Yes, I heard you. The jazz ensemble concluded their set to thunderous applause from the 300 guests who had no idea they were witnessing the most dramatic family revelation in metropolitan grand history. Amanda, Dad said quietly, why didn't you tell us? All these years we thought. Thought what? That I was a failure because I chose to work in hospitality rather than follow traditional professional paths. We were worried about you, Mom protested. We wanted you to have security, success. I have both. I just don't need to announce my net worth at family gatherings to feel successful. But the way we treated you, Jonathan said, his earlier condescension completely gone. The things we said about your lifestyle, your career choices, showed me exactly who you are when you think it doesn't matter what you say to someone. My phone buzzed with a message from my assistant. Phoenix property acquisition documents ready for Monday signing. Atlanta venue tour confirmed for Thursday. I should check on our other properties, I said, glancing at the message. We have 3 events running this weekend across different cities. 3 other events? Vanessa asked. A corporate retreat in Phoenix, a wedding in Atlanta, and a political fundraiser in Denver. Busy weekend for the Williams Hospitality team. As the evening continued and guests began making their departure, my family sat processing their new understanding of who I really was. Not the unsuccessful temp worker they'd dismissed for years, but the owner of the venue where they'd spent the evening explaining why I didn't belong among successful people. Amanda, Mom said as the last guests were leaving, I owe you an apology. Tonight was the most beautiful celebration we could have imagined. It was my pleasure, I said, hugging her. 25 years of marriage deserves to be celebrated properly. But more than that, she continued, I'm sorry for not seeing what you'd built, for not understanding what you were accomplishing. You saw what you expected to see, I said simply. People usually do. As my family finally prepared to leave, collecting their coats and calling for cars, I watched them process the evening's revelations. Tomorrow, when they returned to their social circles, when their friends asked about the incredible anniversary celebration, when they tried to explain how their unsuccessful daughter had surprised them, things would be different. Not because I'd finally proven myself worthy of their respect, but because they'd finally learned the cost of assuming someone's worth based on job titles rather than actual accomplishments. Williams Hospitality Group had bigger expansions planned, better properties under consideration, and more families to serve with memorable celebrations. And for the first time in 5 years, I wouldn't have to explain any of it to people who had already decided I wasn't worth listening to. The Metropolitan Grand returned to its usual elegant quiet as the last guests departed, leaving only the soft sounds of my staff efficiently restoring the ballroom to its pristine condition. Tomorrow, another family would create their own special memories in the venue I'd built, and I'd continue doing what I loved most, creating beautiful spaces for life's most important celebrations.